Welcome back to Unsolicited Advice, brought to you by Toxic Bubblegum. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
And today, we're talking about things that are out of place.
Yes.
Because shit's weird sometimes.
Yes.
It's true. You have a quote.
I do. Regret nothing until it is too late. Then regret everything.
What is that from? Is that Night Vale?
That's Night Vale.
It's a good Night Vale quote.
As you can tell, we didn't have notes for this one. I didn't write out our quote.
Yeah, we sort of are. We're winging it a little bit. It only makes sense to have an out of place quote in an out of place episode.
Yes.
So, yeah, I was just thinking about this the other day.
I'm gonna set this down. My drink is loud.
It's true. It is a cherry limeade.
Yeah.
Not a lime limeade. Or a diet lime limeade.
Or tiger blood.
We went to Sonic. It was...
My idea for the podcast this week was just to read the Sonic menu.
Unfortunately, we do not have a copy of the Sonic menu.
Right.
And I will not look one up.
I will.
However, we have already listed the most important things on the menu, so...
It was tiger's blood.
Tiger's blood. Also pickle juice, the pickle juice slushy.
That's true.
And then...
And the diet lime limeade.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you could add flavors to your limeades. For the signature limeades, one of which was lime flavored.
Good. I think that's why it's a limeade. I don't know why it has to specify it's a lime limeade. I would have figured that a limeade would just...
Yeah.
Be like, whatever. As you can tell, we're off topic. That's gonna be the whole fucking episode, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our theme, though.
That's true. So I was just thinking about this the other day, because I was like, I would watch a Watch Mojo list, as I am ought to do. And it was the fucking top 10 darkest children's TV episode thing. And I was like, that would make for an interesting discussion. Because as it turns out, there are a lot of things that just seem out of place sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, whether it be an episode or a season or just like a scene. They happen.
Yeah.
So, where do we start?
I guess we'll just start with the media segment.
Yeah.
And then transition into, like, how you can do it well.
Right.
And
Because...
Right. Because I said we were going to end on this, and here I am going to delve into it, like, right
now.
But it's one of those things where if you do it right, having scenes like that, having moments like that in your story really can leave a good impact.
Right. Sometimes it leaves more of an impact than the rest of the story.
Right.
Strangely enough.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I'm going to talk about when we get into some media stuff.
Let's do that now.
Let's do about that. So, we were just talking about this because I just pulled up a list because I was trying to find more examples. Invader Zim was a show that was very popular, but the only thing I remember about it is the really fucking dark shit that happened.
Yeah.
Notoriously, there's the Dark Harvest episode where...
I'm pretty sure Dark Harvest is the only episode of Invader Zim I ever saw.
I watched...
It piqued my interest in the show, and I got, like, really excited, and then I tried to start from the beginning, and everything seemed, like, really boring.
Yeah, exactly. It's, like, that's the... Like, I don't remember. I watched other episodes of Invader Zim, but, like, so Dark Harvest is an episode where Zim... An alien has to pass a physical exam, but he doesn't have human organs, because he is an alien. So he goes around stealing organs from the other children, and replacing them with, non-organ things. And so it's really just fucked up, because everyone's losing their organs, and, like, everything is wrong, and, like, by the end of it, Zim looks totally disgusting. Which, I mean, like, the gross out factor was one of the part of that show.
Yeah.
It was one of those dark mixed with gross out stuff, but it's the only episode I remember, and it's so dark, even compared to the rest of the show, because they don't get those organs back. That's not how the episode ends. The episode ends with Zim winning.
Right.
And that's how it ends. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, dude. Where did that come from? Because usually it ends with Zim, failing, because that's what happens when you have a bad guy as your antagonist in a kids show.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just like really, really fucking dark out of nowhere. So it's like, that's...
There's an episode of Doctor Who like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say that, like, having a dark concept like that is gonna make a Doctor Who episode out of place.
Right.
Because they have, like, a handful of them. But the one that always really stuck out with me is, there's a ship that runs partially... It's like a biomechanic thing.
Uh-huh.
And the crew was killed to keep the ship running.
Jesus Christ.
So there were, like, and it opens up, like, the panel in the ship, and you get to see, like, where all the organs
Hate that.
Yeah. Having organs, randomly in your show, good way to...
Organs where they usually aren't? Usually
Yeah.
fucked up, as it turns out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh.
So yeah, that was, like, one of my favorite Doctor Who's.
Of course it was.
Well, also, that sounded bad. That made it sound like I like the one really dark episode of Doctor Who. The subplot in that one, like the other, because you know there's always like multiple things going on. The story took place during like the French Renaissance.
Ah, of course.
And it was a really good episode outside of all of the ship stuff that was happening.
Outside of the...
I actually think the ship stuff might have been the subplot, because the Doctor was in France.
Huh. They were just like, I really want to throw this in here.
Romancing a lady. But, like, Rose was on the ship?
Jesus Christ.
Someone was trying to harvest her organs, maybe? I started this out with, like, I remember it really well, but honestly, I need to watch Doctor Who again. It's been, like, a long time.
Oh my god. Jeez. Some things are bizarre, as it turns out. And it's like, having, like, a dark episode isn't always, like... It isn't always out of place. Like, sometimes, like, it builds up to it, and then it's, like, a naturally, like, progression thing where, like, it gets darker and darker. But sometimes, things just end up really dark for, like, no reason.
Yeah.
There's the episode that we just saw, the Powerpuff Girls, where they, it's the Twisted Sister episode where they make a fourth sister who is wrong, but it's like she's trying to, like, help them and everything, and they end up sending her away, and then she comes back and, like, saves the day, and then she dies. Like, she just fucking dies, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Dude, what the fuck just happened? It was really weird.
There's also, like, the opposite of that, where, like, you have a really dark show, but then you have one fun episode, or, like, one really fun scene.
Right.
And it stands out. We were talking about this also when we first brought up the topic, because they're in American Horror Story Asylum. There's one character who's had, and this kind of should show you how dark the season was surrounding it, because what triggers the whole thing is that she's just had overly powered electroshock therapy, but it, like, snaps something in her brain, and she has a, like, musical montage in her head, which... When you're not thinking about how it happens, it was really out of place, because the whole show, the whole season had been, like, so dark and dreary up to that point. And then the cast gets together to sing the name game, and you're like, what is happening right now? They're all wearing, like, nice dance outfits, and, like, the lighting gets better. And
right, and everything's, like, nice. And
it's such an upbeat song to have in the middle of that.
It's weird, because it's, like, comedic relief isn't a stranger to, like, dark stuff.
Right.
But when it's such a
drastic change so suddenly.
Right, that's when it's like, is that correct? Was it supposed to be there?
And it's something that since then there's, like, a musical interlude, I think, in just about every season of... I haven't seen the latest season yet, but it's something that American Horror Story has done consistently since then, and Freak Show had, like, 5 of them, but it's like, the first time it happened,
it was like, what? Oh no.
Like, oh no.
What's happening?
So that's fun.
It's always fun.
And then there's also, because that was, like, a fun musical thing that happened, we were also talking, a lot of shows have musical episodes.
Right. which in shows that are not typically musical,
Yeah.
can come out of nowhere. And some shows, like, end up, like, some shows justify it. Like, the Buffy musical episode is, like, a demon. In the Scrubs episode, it's, like,
It was the brain
tumor.
In the Grey's Anatomy, it was like a blunt trauma situation.
But other times, sometimes musicals just happen.
Yeah. A really good example of this, for those of you, for my 90s, early 2000s fans out there, a really good example of the difference between these two things is looking at the first Xena musical and the second Xena musical. Because the first one, they're in a land of, like, deception. They're in Illusia, which, you know, everything's, like, very musical and theatric, and it makes sense that everyone's singing, and they kind of go through that at the beginning and throughout the episode. The second one, they're, like, getting ready for a play or something, and just, like, everyone's singing about it as they're putting it to... It was so bad. Like, I've only seen it the one time.
Ooh.
I could not sit through it again.
That's rough.
It was, and that's where you find out, because they also brought out, they had this thing in Xena where they're like, what if we had a bunch of strange lookalikes who aren't related to the cast, but look just like them? And they had, Joxer had, like, a gay stage manager.
Of course.
Twin guy.
Of course.
They weren't related, but actually I think they might have been.
Huh.
Like, Xena wasn't related to any of her
lookalikes,
but I think Joxer was related to his.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, weird show.
That's true.
And, like, the first one was justified. The second one...
was not.
Absolutely not.
Like, what...
And another really good example, and I hate doing this, because I think this might be the first time I've talked about this show on our podcast, and I would like it to be for something good, because it's one of my favorite shows. But the Psych musical?
Yeah.
Bad. Really bad. Because there were so many they go out of their way to, like, explain why people are singing while it's happening, and then at the end, they're just pitching an idea for a musical.
Like,
so it would have made sense if everyone was, like...
If it didn't explain it until the end.
Waited until the end, because it was just an explanation. They could have had one of those two explanations, but having both...
didn't make sense.
...was bad. And it kills me, because I love the show so much.
Yeah, Psych is so good.
Like, one of the worst musical episodes of all time.
Oh, poor thing.
Like, if I had to rank them, it would be the second to last.
Wow.
It would be just above the second Xena musical.
I was about to say, it's not below the second Xena musical, is it?
No.
There's also, like, it's not always individual episodes. I mostly brought this up because Kat wanted to talk about Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
And we just watched, like, one of the episodes from the third season because Kat was like, this season is really dark, and then she described me one of the episodes, which is supposed to be, like, the fun episode, and it was fucking dark as shit, dude.
And, yeah, anyone who listens to this who watches Rick and Morty is probably thinking that Rick and Morty is already kind of a dark show, which it is, but there are instances where it kind of goes above and beyond. The first instance is just, like, an episode. It's, I think, season 2, episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Autoerotic Assimilation. Good title.
Oh, no!
But it's good. It deals with a lot of, like, representation and stuff. The episode is really good. But at the end, we see that Rick is contemplating suicide, and the episode ends there. And it was, like, really dark, because there's usually a comedic thing that they cycle back around to right at the end.
Right.
And, so it didn't do it that time. And then also...
That's fucked up, man.
Yeah, it was just, like, one really dark episode in the middle of season 2, and then, this third season, season 3 starts off with the infamous Szechuan sauce episode, which, you know, got a lot of media attention because of the McDonald's things that happened after.
It was a little rough, as it turns out.
But, yeah, what I didn't know, because I watch Rick and Morty late, I wait for it to come out on Hulu, and what I didn't know is that at the end of it, like, Rick just starts talking about how, he makes the people who cross him disappear and gets them out of people's lives, and he goes on, like, this whole rant about it, and it kind of mirrors, it's like the, evil version of his monologue from the first episode, but with, like, a really dark twist, and the whole season really follows that, and there's a line in there, he's like, this is gonna be the darkest year of our adventures, and
it is.
Season 3 is dark, like, they made good on their promise. It's
scary.
Really scary.
It's absurd because it's not like the show hasn't done dark stuff before, because there is the entire episode where they go to another universe, and replace their dead counterparts.
Yeah, they mess up a world so bad that the only course of action is to find a parallel universe where they've died, bury their bodies before anyone can find them, and just live out life in that universe like nothing happened.
And it's fucked up.
Which is like one of the ongoing jokes of the show.
And it's like...
So there have already been dark elements in the thing.
But sometimes it goes really far down the rabbit hole.
And there are like 10 episodes this season, and they're all pretty not okay. That's how I would describe them.
That's how it goes. Sometimes.
That was one of the things I wanted to really talk about. And then, like, this last season of Kimmy Schmidt got really dark.
Yeah.
Which I think actually, because it wasn't the only show, there have been a lot of Netflix shows lately that have had dark seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it is that shows, like, even if they're comedy shows, like anything that does satire or political tie-ins, sort of reflects what's going on. And
oh boy, has it been bad.
Yeah, with all of the stuff that's been going on in our country lately, I guess it's not that surprising that a political satire show
would get dark.
got really dark. But they get into some pretty deep stuff this last season, and it's like, it's still funny, but it definitely stood out.
It's like, I'm trying to think. Oh, it was what I was going to bring up. One of the other cartoons I was going to go is the episode of Courage.
Right.
The Mask. Because it's like, the show's fucking weird. Like, Courage has always prided itself on being really weird. But in the Mask episode, it's like one of their only 2-part episodes that they ever did. And it starts off with this stranger comes in wearing a mask and is terrorizing Courage. Because they hate dogs. And then you find out it's because her best friend is in an abusive relationship with a dog and is, like, being held away from her and, like, her life by this dog and his, like, gang of dogs. And it's, like, so, like, it ends up being, like, about Courage rescuing this other girl from an abusive relationship. And it's, like, whoa! Jesus Christ! I thought, I rewatched it, and I originally thought that the boyfriend dog died. I thought he got hit by the train and died. But as it turns out, it's just a Courage thing where someone gets hit by a train and is like...
And it's fine.
And it's fine.
Yeah.
They're just, like, really fucking out of it. But it's also just, like... Oh, God. There's, like... she tries to leave him at one point. She tries to leave the boyfriend, and he, like, beats her up, and they put her, like, in traditional Courage fashion in a weird...
It was like a flower pot.
Yeah, they put her in the flower pot. They, like, buried her in the flower pot with her head sticking up. But he did, like, hit her.
Yeah.
And it was like, what the fuck is this? So, it, like, it wasn't weird, it was, like, actively very dark.
Yeah. With
the content, and it was like, what... I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
I was just expecting, like, some weird fly thing again. Because sometimes it's just a weird fly thing.
Yeah.
Or chickens, or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always the... God. That fucking episode. For some reason, that doesn't make it onto, like, the dark cartoon lists. And I'm like, is it because the rest of the show is so fucked up?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
I think it's because there's, like, it's hard to pick. Because there's also, like, the one with the fish.
Oh, you mean the perfect episode?
What?
Or which one?
The one with, like, the shrimp.
Oh my god, I don't remember. Oh! There's so...
Courage was just kind of a fucked up show, honestly.
I was thinking about the perfect episode, which is the series finale.
Oh god.
Because that's the fish I always think of as the...
I forgot
perfect.
about that, honestly.
And then I was also thinking about the one with the coral. It was like they weren't shrimp. They were like sea monkeys or whatever. But it was like they went to the beach. And there was like the coral reef, and then Eustace's mom was there trying to harvest them for wigs.
Right.
What was the shrimp one?
They had like I don't remember if it was like shrimp or fish or like what the thing was, but I guess it must have been fish. Anyway, they have like a fish bowl, and someone that calls like the Council of Fish or whatever, because they've been eating fish.
Yeah, that's right.
So they have to they get sentenced to live
in the fish. Oh my god.
I don't know. It was weird. It got into some like really heavy cannibalism themes.
God, that's fucked up. There's also the banana episode. That one's not dark. That's just a banana episode.
My favorite thing is because I read there's like a creepypasta thread for like lost episode.
Of course.
Things. And someone, one of my all-time favorite things that I found on that thread is someone had like a Lost Courage episode, but it literally just was an episode of Courage.
Oh my god.
And I think that was the fish one.
That's funny.
But someone was like describing it, and they had written it out like it was a creepypasta, but
it was just a description of Courage episode.
Yeah. It was really effective though at first, because as I was reading it, I was like getting memories of this episode back, and it's like, oh my god.
Oh my god, this didn't wait. That's just an episode of Courage.
Just an episode.
I love Courage though. Courage is a great show.
Yeah.
They took it off Netflix, I think. It makes me sad. Because they never put the first season up. They had like seasons 3 and 4.
Right.
But they never put up seasons 1 and 2, so I never got to rewatch those.
Speaking of Netflix, my other Netflix original series that got really dark randomly for a season was Orange is the New Black. And that's sort of one of those things, like we were saying with the politics, the whole show kind of is to show corruption in the prison system. So each season gets a little bit more in-depth into the corruption. But in between season 3 and season 4, it got really dark, and it became less about like corruption in the system and more about, because they hire a bunch of guards who are just like abusive,
right,
who are just like terrible people, and it got so bad. Like season 4 was hard to watch, honestly. And then like as the guards are getting more abusive, the prisoners are like fighting more against each other, and they're getting increasingly like more abusive in the community also.
Right.
And it just, wow, dark.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there were points during season 4 where it's like, I don't really know why I'm watching this anymore. It made me so sad.
Right.
And it was, like, I'm not gonna say that it was completely random, because it did push things to the breaking point, because season 5 was all about a prison riot. It like just takes place during the week of the riot, and like I understand they had to get it to that point somehow, but it was definitely, from the gradual decline that we'd been seeing, it was a steep drop. Right,
it was just suddenly a cliff.
Right.
Just right down.
And it was bad. It was hard. So that's like another good of like a whole season being really really dark.
There was also, you wanted to talk about space movies.
Yes.
Space horror movies.
This is it kind of, I don't know if they do this in other movies or if it's something that's exclusive to the horror franchise.
I feel like it's just the horror franchise that does this.
If there are enough sequels to a horror movie, there's always like that one space installation. Which sounds like a fake thing,
but it's true.
Really not.
Because there's
the most famous example is Jason X. Was randomly like Friday the 13th in space.
Because sometimes Jason is in space, I guess.
But there's also like Leprechaun in space. Michael Myers had a space installation. Nightmare on Elm Street didn't really do that, but it's just because, it was in a dreamscape.
Right.
So there were, already...
You could already be in space.
Right. There's, that weird Wizard of Oz thing that they had going on.
I remember that scene.
That was, the closest I think they ever got to having, a space movie. But it's... Yeah, so that's a fun little horror thing.
And it's one of those things where it always happens late into the series. And it's they're not supposed to be taken seriously, are they?
I don't know. I think probably Jason X was. Because they were just so out of ideas at that point. Because it's the 10th movie.
Right.
So, but, I don't know. I feel like some of them can't be taken seriously.
Well, I feel like Leprechaun was always sort of
yeah.
It's never supposed to be, super serious, because it's Leprechaun.
That's fair. But yeah, I think Leprechaun also got to its space thing way earlier, I feel like, than a lot of...
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, because they did, the 2 gangster ones. They did Leprechaun into Hood and Leprechaun back to the Hood.
Oh my god.
Which was bad. Those were next to each other, and I think Space came right before that, but it might have come right after. But the point was...
or after.
It wasn't 10.
Right.
You know? So yeah, that's a fun, horror standout.
It's just sometimes
trope.
Things are in space, I guess.
And this, because we talked about it a little bit in American Horror Story, sometimes there are also, burlesque scenes in horror movies that never make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true.
A really classic example of this being... Oh, I guess I could also talk... That's not really... The example I was going to use from House of a Thousand Corpses, there's Showtime, where they kind of interject this plot about how the Firefly family does this, Halloween show. So they have, this really racist grandfather telling jokes for, 30 seconds, and then they have,
That's awkward.
Baby Firefly? Is that her name? Sherry Moon Zombie? Rob Zombie's daughter comes to do, a sexy dance, where she, lip syncs an old 50s song or whatever. It's
weird.
It was a really weird scene, and the whole thing in its entirety is slightly under 2 minutes, but it just... I remember it better than most of the movie, honestly, because it was so weird.
Sometimes it's just... Yeah. Sometimes, there's just, when you're trying to make something really stand out, or, do something old-timey, sometimes it goes a little too far to the point where it's just what the fuck just happened?
And then sometimes it's a little bit more effective, I guess, because there's also the other one that I thought of is, From Dusk Till Dawn, Salma Hayek does a sexy dance.
Ooh, sexy dance.
It maybe went on a little bit too long, because it had, no barrier to the plot, but also, she was in, a bar, she's in, a lady dance club thing. And, it made sense for her to be doing it.
Right.
Wasn't relevant,
but
definitely stood out. But, it was a little bit more justified than
suddenly
Showtime
being in the 50s.
Right.
Weirdly.
A little bit.
There's also an instance where a show starts out a certain way and then just gets really fucking dark.
Yeah.
Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is what I'm talking about.
Of course.
Because the first season starts out and it's all just fucking shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part. It sort of touches on some of the darker stuff. But then, we get into season 2 and, we start seeing these, actually really problematic behaviors.
Yeah.
And, addiction and shit like that. And then season 3 just fucking goes off the deep end. Is,
My favorite thing, and this is what I liked so much about season 3 of Rick and Morty, is because, there was, that warning that we talked about, and there's this point in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend where they're talking about how life isn't like a movie,
right?
And things don't wrap up that way, and there's, a whole musical number about it, and
then
from that point, it just keeps declining into madness, and it's
Josh Groban was there.
Josh Groban was definitely there.
Josh Groban was definitely the one singing that song.
He was in, that exact musical.
I was that's what I remember. Josh Groban was there. Talking about out of place.
Yeah.
Because he shows up and he's never there again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's accurate.
But yeah, it's like, cause like I got to the middle of that season and it was like, oh my god, this is so sad. I can't keep watching this show by myself.
Yeah.
Oh. But yeah, so sometimes like the genre, like the tone of the media shifts, but usually like it doesn't shift very suddenly.
Right.
The most effective ones usually have a gradual shift to them.
Which is something I think is really good about a lot of Joss Whedon shows, is that they mature.
Yeah.
Gradually, in a way that it makes sense. Like, there are a lot of, like, non-sequitur episodes in long-running Joss Whedon shows. Once More with Feeling, we talked about, is, like, the musical episode of Buffy. But there's also, like, they had, like, a weird dream sequence episode where it was just everyone having weird dream sequences. And it was just, like... So, there were episodes like that, but for the most part, it was, like, a gradual...
Right,
like,
it gradually...
got darker and more mature, and which, you know, made sense for the
right,
show.
Because as it...
Because Buffy was growing up.
Right, it's not like a cartoon or, like, anything like that where time can sort of stand still. Like, there's no need to have, like, the growing up aspect to it. Whereas with, like, live action shows, there's your actors are aging. And, like, especially if you're doing it on, like, a timeline, like, you're actively pursuing a timeline, which is what Buffy did.
Yeah.
Because they were in high school, and they were in college, and then... So it's, like, it makes sense that if you're having your characters grow with time, that the tone is going to change, because that's sort of how life is.
Yeah. There's also, there was one really dark episode of Dollhouse, though, which was weird, cause
this was the one
this is a good example of, a show, like a dark show that also has, like, a one random dark episode.
Was this the one with the lady with the who dies, or
no.
was it a different one?
It was a different one.
What?
All of the dolls are supposed to have signed contracts that declare that they are giving their bodies over to the dollhouse for a set amount of time. There's one girl who was falsely put into an institution because a man was stalking her, and he had connections to the institution. The dollhouse took her in as part of her recovery, which she never signed for. And we don't find this out until at the beginning of the thing. The man finally comes, and he's just willing to buy her with one final personality that he's chosen for her.
Jesus
and you find
Christ.
out after he's bought her that was how she initially was connected to the dollhouse. So it, like, goes through... And it's, like, it's told on multiple timelines. And it just, like... We get to see him pursuing her initially, and we get to see her time in the institution, like, and they were putting her on medication to keep her acting psychotic, so that the dollhouse would take her. We get to see all of this as, because one of the whole things, my favorite character, Topher, is, like, kind of the comic relief. He's nonchalant, he doesn't really care about anything.
Right.
For most of the show, and it's... After he's put this personality in her and learned how she got into the dollhouse, it's, like, where he finally starts to develop a conscience. Like, that's where the line is for him. Like, the dollhouse has finally gone too far. And it's, like, so he's trying to get her back, but, like, the deal has already gone through. And it was, like, it was a really dark concept in such a dark show anyway.
It was, like...
And it, just because I think it was already so dark, like, no one expected it to have, like, a random dark episode.
Right, because it was already dark.
And then, like, and you feel so bad for him because he's just trying so hard to finally do the right thing for a change. And he ends up, she ends up killing the guy. And he goes in to help her, and he gets one of the other handlers in to help him with this. And it ends with them, like, dissolving this guy's body in the tub.
God.
And it just, like, and you can see that he's just so traumatized by the whole thing, even though he was trying to do good for once, and it was just like...
Right, and it's like...
It was sad. It's
like so fucked up, man.
Really messed up.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you have like a happy example to follow my
Not really.
dollhouse thing? In that case, season 5, Game of Thrones. Like, we always talk about it on here for being bad, but it was also really dark.
Yeah, it's just like, it has some of that fucking darkest, and also some of the most unnecessarily dark moments in the show.
Yeah.
Is like, which is part of why it was so bad, because so much of the stuff was unnecessary. It was like, what?
Yeah, it was like, it was too much, it was like too graphic, but it was also filler.
Right.
So it like wasn't serving a point, and it was uncomfortable to watch.
Right, it was just
a bad combination.
It was dark for the sake of being dark.
Right.
Which is one of my pet peeves in stuff. Is like, it doesn't have to be though.
And that's why we didn't like it, but a lot of even the relevant arcs were just kind of dark that season. That's where we really get to meet Ramsay. Like, he's in the earlier seasons, but he's just kind of like a weird dude who shows up to torture people. But then he was like a main character in season 5.
And it was the worst. Because, oh my god.
Yeah. And then that's also, like, the House of Faces thing is one of my favorite arcs in concept, but they also tied it into, like, that weird... They're like, what if Marin Trant was also a pedophile? And I was like, whoa, what? And it was like, are you gonna learn about the House of Faces, or are you gonna take care of this pedophile? And it's like,
what?
Oh boy.
Huh?
What? Because I guess kind of the takeaway from that was supposed to be that you have to put your God above your morals.
Right.
But... what a dark way to get there.
Yeah, honestly, it was like, what the
really
fuck
uncomfortable.
is this? Also wrong.
Yeah. Season 5.
Season 5 was bad. Did not like it. Would not go back and watch it again. No, because the other one I had was Teen Titans.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, because like everything with Slade was like super dark.
Yeah.
Like, specifically, there's the episode where Robin has PTSD from his entire encounter with Slade, so he's, like, hallucinating him everywhere, and he's getting, like, physical injuries, and, like, he's, like, getting mad at his friends because they can't see him, but he knows he's there, and it's all been a hallucination, and it's like, this is so fucked up, man! This is upsetting! It's especially upsetting when it happens to, like, a younger character.
Yeah.
Because the concept of the show is they are teenagers. So this is a teenager who has been traumatized to the point of PTSD.
They're what?
Yes.
They're teenagers?
They are teenagers.
What?
That's what the Teen Titans is.
Oh, no.
It's teenagers.
What?
Yes.
I don't like that.
Well, that's how it is.
My whole concept of Teen Titans has been ruined.
There was no way you could have known. But yeah, I find it especially upsetting when, like, dark stuff starts happening to younger people, because it's like, that's upsetting.
Yeah.
No one should have to go through that, especially not a kid or teenager.
And it's, that's, like, one of the weird things that I kind of like about Kimmy Schmidt, is because she's, like, in middle school when she's taken, but they never, like, even when they show flashbacks, it's still Ellie Kemper. Like, we don't see any child actors being, like, tormented.
Right.
Which is nice. Good because it's a comedy show.
Right,
like,
because
it would have been, the concept is really dark, and I think, like, not having the child actors in it helps us focus on the fact that this is, like, exposition to a comedy.
I think it also helps keep the show's tone up, because, like, she does act like a child still.
Right.
So I think it's actually a very good stylistic choice. Yeah. Also, it sort of keeps...
Oh god, that was... speaking of dark things and shows, there's an episode in this last season of Kimmy Schmidt, and, like, aside from the political undertones making the show really dark, there's an episode where she finds her backpack from when she was, like, a kid.
Oh, no.
And she's, like, having adventures with it, and, like, we get to see what she imagines the backpack is like, and they're having, like, a good time. There's a part where she almost drowns it in the bay because she has to grow up, and that, like... I'm an adult woman, but the show came out like last month. It was traumatizing to me. I didn't like it.
Because holy shit.
Deeply, she doesn't. Like she ends up not doing it at like the last minute, but it was like really dark.
Yeah,
and,
that's
and like we can see her imagination, and the backpack is like pleading not to be drowned, and I'm like, what? Oh god.
Oh.
Really worried about the writers of this show.
Sometimes that's how it be.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So like most of our examples are shows.
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit. Did you find the movie thing? Was that helpful?
Sort
Alan
of.
was looking at lists.
There
earlier.
was not, like, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't seen a lot of these movies. But, like, because I don't watch movies. But, like, we talked about my first example of this was, in Star Trek Into Darkness, this is also one of the examples, in Star Trek Into Darkness, there's just a scene where, Dr. Carroll just is stripping randomly, like, for no reason whatsoever. It was just so Kirk had an excuse to see her in her underwear, which he didn't ask for.
Yeah, that was the thing that really bothered me about the scene, was she's like, don't look at me, and he looks around, and he's like, oh, you're changing, and it's like, what? Hey.
And it was like, it's not relevant to the rest of the movie. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, what? I know why it's there, because, like, male directors are perverts. And it's like, but it's also like, what the fuck is this?
That being said, I have seen the deleted Into Darkness scene, like, 1,000 times where Benedict Cumberbatch takes a shower. But you could argue that he doesn't have, like, a weird thing in there where he's like, don't watch me take this shower.
Yeah, it's
like,
the whole framing
like
of the entire scene was bad.
Made it really weird. Because I think it's one of those things, like, it's okay to want to see sexy ladies. It's, like, the tone of the scene made it, like, super weird.
It's also, like, one of those things where it's, like, there's so many of those unnecessary fan service scenes already.
Right.
That it's like, especially with that added, like, non-consensual thing there, it's, like, not good. It's bad, even.
Yeah. Plus, also, she was played by Alice Eve. She's just, like, a pretty lady.
Yeah.
Like, I was comfortable just having her in the movie.
She was already a pretty lady. We didn't need to establish.
Like, we didn't... Yeah, it's weird.
Awkward sexual tension.
And it was, like, in between two really tense action scenes.
Right?
It, like, slowed down the movie.
It didn't make any sense. It shouldn't have been there. There's also the one that is... we found on this list also. There's, you can argue that the entirety of the room is out of place.
Movie,
the entirety of Tommy Wiseau's acting is out of place. Because, like, everyone else is, like, bad, but I mean, like, Tommy Wiseau is just not there. He just is so bad. But there's just a scene where, like, Lisa's talking to her mom, and her mom is just like, I definitely have breast cancer. And it's like, they bring it up, and then they don't talk about it. Ever again. And it's like...
The one that really, like, the breast cancer one was on the list, that Alan was looking at, that I just read, but the one that always gets me is, beat her up so bad she ended up on a hospital on Guerrero Street.
He laughed.
What a story.
What a story, Mark. Why did you laugh about that? That's not funny.
Funny.
Why? But yeah, I feel like we typically see less out of place scenes in movies.
Right.
And like, standalone novels because sort of they have a whole tone the way through.
Yeah.
But you were about to say something.
No, I was just gonna talk about the room more, because there's also there's like the flower shop scene.
Oh my god.
Which really stands out to me, because it's like,
11
because everything in
seconds
the
long.
movie is so long and so drawn out, but there's like that one really fast-paced scene.
Right, where it's like, what
That just...
the fuck just happened?
No, but I do think because they are like solid pieces, you know, that we do see them more like in shows.
I think it's typically also because on shows, like, you usually have like more writers flexing in and out,
Right.
and you also have directors flexing in and out. It's not always the same person. So like, where generally a movie doesn't usually change directors first halfway through,
Right.
or writers halfway through. Like, usually, unless it's really bad. So...
Yeah.
We also wanted to talk about an unpopular opinion that we have.
Oh boy, yeah, spoiler alert for Hereditary.
We didn't like it.
That's not a spoiler alert. I've been very vocal about this. Spoilers are coming, but yeah, the unpopular opinion, Hereditary, bad.
Yeah, it was a bad movie.
It
was like fine for the first hour and a half, and then like it just kept going.
Yeah, it like Hereditary does seem like someone just like tacked a blooper reel onto the end of a horror movie.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. It just sort of happened.
And I have a lot of really unpopular movie opinions, honestly. That's my whole thing.
Yeah, that's like your
thing. Hereditary is like... I lost like hundreds and hundreds of followers from my horror blog over it, but this is like... But it got like an 87 or whatever.
Right.
Critically. It got like an 87%, I think. Hereditary has a 95.
Which is absurd because the ending makes no sense.
So this is like above and beyond my usual unpopular opinion standard. And also I feel very strongly about it, because like The Conjuring has like 98 or whatever, and I didn't like it, but I don't feel really strongly about my hatred of it. Like, Hereditary objectively was a bad film.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, because like the ending, like, first of all, drags on for a long time. Like it's like the last 5 to 10 minutes.
It's like a twist ending that it took them 15 minutes to reveal the twist to.
Right, it like lingered on it, and I mean like for some reason, the special effects at the end were very bad. Like, there's the scene where like the lady is floating up to the ghost house, the tree house, but it looks like
an
it's
L shape.
Yeah,
where she like clips up into the tree.
It's like, what?
Oh boy.
And then it's like, it has like the twist and everything, but it's like, it lingers on it for so long, and it was just like, they had like the fucking effigy in the treehouse that was not scary.
They give him like the Burger King crown at the end was the part that kills me, because it's like paper mache or whatever. Like, I don't know what it was supposed to be made out of. This flimsy 2-dimensional crown that they give this dude. It's bad.
It's bad. I don't understand how no one else sees the issues with it.
Yeah.
We found like one review that agreed with us.
Yeah.
Out of all of them.
Not nearly as strongly as we did.
Yeah.
It gave it like a 20%, and it was like the ending was bad. And it's like, that really doesn't cover...
So like, it doesn't cover the last hour of that movie.
So that's gonna be, like, in juxtaposition to that, a really good out of place, because having a very different tone either at the end or beginning of a film can be very effective.
Right.
I think a really good example of framing a movie with that kind of dramatic change is Martyrs opens up with like a nice family breakfast, which and it's like right before the family in question gets slaughtered.
Right.
So it's like there is that very dramatic shift, but it helps to set the tone of the movie as opposed to getting us invested in a certain tone before switching.
Right. And I feel like if you're going to use a twist ending to shift your movie, you have to have built it up enough You need to, like, have all the evidence there. You have to... So that after you see the ending, you can go back, and it should change the way you watch the film a second time.
Yeah.
Whereas
in all fairness, have not seen Hereditary a second time.
But...
Maybe.
No.
Maybe it's fixed if you watch it a second time.
No, because it's still an hour and a half of really good build-up that works. And then weird shit.
For like an hour. Because the way that we've described it makes it sound like it's like an hour and 45 minutes. When
it is
2.5 hours. Just to clarify that.
God. That's time in my life I'll never get back.
While we're talking about horror movies and unpopular opinions and things that stand out, I think a really interesting example of this is actually the Purge franchise.
Yeah.
Because they're all very similar in tone and message, except for the first one.
Right. Like.
And the way that they advertised the second one, Anarchy, was they made it seem like they were going to start with a central concept and with like a specific example and branch out on the concept, which I thought was really interesting. And that's not what they did. We have 4 Purge movies now, and they, like, 3 of them all follow the same tone, more or less, with, like, the same ideals and the same message. They're lit very similarly. They feel like a series.
Right.
That doesn't really connect to the first Purge movie.
Yeah,
because it wasn't a gradual transition like they made it seem like it was going to be. It was like one very localized suspenseful horror film, and then like 3 out in the world other things.
Right, and I think also because like the thing I think of with the Purge is like the thing with like election year and like even this first Purge, they always have those masks.
Yeah.
You know the one, and they had them in Anarchy too, which is when they started doing them. But that's always what I think of.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there were masks in the first one?
There was like one mask in the first one,
but
the
like,
guy takes it off immediately.
Right, and then, but it's not the same, because it's like, it's always the ones with the X eyes and like the big smiles, whereas the other ones were just like weird doll masks in the first one.
Yeah. That's how I would describe that, I guess.
Yeah.
Weird masks.
It's weird. I mean, I'm not the horror movie person, but it almost seems like the first Purge movie is very similar to Funny Games.
Yeah.
Whereas the others are not.
Except for, and here's the thing, because I think it would have been a really interesting concept if they had done it more like they marketed it, and less like, because in execution, it's one of those things where what made Funny Games really suspenseful is that, or like what made it really terrifying is there was that element of realism.
Right.
So the first Purge movie, just like the Purge, it's very similar in content, but they have created this whole unrealistic concept
to
justify it, which kind of takes the fear out of it, honestly.
Right. Because you know that something bad is going to happen.
Right.
Whereas with Funny Games, it's sort of like builds it up as it's like, oh, these are just like these other guys who are also here, and then it's like, and now it's fucked up.
If they had tied them all together, The Purge would have been the start of a really interesting and unique franchise. The way that they came out, The Purge is like that weird outlier that you expect to see really late in a franchise.
Right, like Jason X.
Which is weird because it's the one that started it.
Right.
Like,
it's like they had...
The Purge is like a weird horror phenomenon as a series.
Like, they had the concept, and like, they were like, yeah, let's do this, and then it was like, but they did it wrong the first time, and then they were like, oh, wait, shit, let's do that again.
Yeah. So that's just, like, a fun example of it, I guess.
There's also, like, this always happens in series, there's always, like, the one movie, it's like Saw 4, where it's just really bad, which isn't necessarily always a genre thing, but it is a sharp departure from the rest of the series.
Yeah. I feel like I don't watch enough movies in other genres that I can give examples of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, something that happens with shows a lot is that seasonal decay.
Yeah.
It keeps going, and people run out of ideas for it, so they start putting subpar content out for something that has had great content previously.
Yeah.
And so it really sort of... Sorry, my dog laid down on me. He wants attention. But yeah, they just really want the, like, attention to keep... They want to keep making money off of it without putting in the same effort.
Right.
So, which results in either tonal shifts or quality shifts or a mixture of stuff.
Jumping back to shows real fast before we move on to... Because we were going to talk about short story collections.
Yes.
But real fast, another dark episode that I think just really stood out in a good way, strangely enough. We're going to be talking about it in a positive light.
Oh, what?
There was a 2-part episode of Grey's Anatomy that was just... It dealt with a shooter, and it was filmed like a horror movie in the middle of, like, this random drama relationship season.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bold choice, but I think it really paid off.
Right, like...
I also really like horror movies. Oh! Also,
yes.
I keep remembering things, like, not in a convenient order, which is why we usually do notes. Because for the standout thing we were also going to talk about, there's a film noir episode of Adventure Time that just makes me really happy, where BMO is a detective, and it's the episode is in black and white, and it's, like, shot like a film noir movie, and it just, like, it's a fun mystery thing.
I think that's fun. Something that, like, cartoons can do very effectively is they can suddenly change things, and it won't be as shocking as it is in, like, a more, like, mature... I'm talking about, like, children's cartoons. I should preface that. In a, like, a more live-action, not as flexible setting.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of... When you get the tone of a show and it's very serious, you don't really want it to deviate that much very suddenly. But when it's already, like, a lighthearted thing, you can sort of swing it around more and...
Yeah. You have a little bit more wiggle room. Although, in adult animation, they also can do it very well. A good example, one of the times that Futurama was rebooted, they had an episode that was just, like, different styles of thing. They also did a weird, like, nature documentary one that had
Why not?
facts about different nature things.
Sure.
But, like, the cast is fish or turtles or whatever. I don't know. I need to watch Futurama again, too.
That's fair.
I guess.
Futurama's good.
It's really good. So, yeah.
But yeah, then we wanted to also talk about short stories, because there's usually, in short stories collections, there's usually the one that's like, what?
Yeah.
What's that doing here?
And a really good example of this, because we were talking about, like, short story collections, but if you look at entire authors' work, like, their entire body of work when it relates to short stories, you can kind of see there's always, like, one or two that just don't fit in. I want to talk about Joe Hill.
Yeah.
I'm very tentative to say anything less than glowing about Joe Hill. But he does have a couple stories that are swings. My all-time favorite short story collection is a one-author anthology by Joe Hill. It's called 20th Century Ghosts. And for the most part, like, some of my all-time favorite short stories are in there, which is why I like the collection so much. But there is one in there called Pop Art that it's about it's a contemporary-esque society where some people are born inflatable, and
that's a fetish. That's a fetish thing.
That is discrimination against inflatable people, because they're sentient.
You think? The fetish thing?
They're...
doesn't contain sentient people? You're discriminating.
Oh no. I have to apologize to Joe Hill. No, but
Joe Hill needs to apologize to me.
The first line is, like, when I was 12, my best friend was inflatable, and I'm not gonna lie, I was probably over halfway through the story before I realized that it was actual people who happened to be inflatable and not, in fact, a child who had a psychotic break when he was very young. Because I guess because everything else in the novel was, like, contemporary horror.
Right.
I feel like that just, I had been programmed to rationalize.
Right.
So I had a really tough time my first time reading through pop art. I was like, what?
What the fuck is
And it's very surrealistic. I wouldn't even call it horror, really. It was like a surrealistic fantasy story in the middle of this horror collection, and I was like, what is happening?
Right.
And I still don't know, honestly.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you brought up Joe Hill, because Stephen King also has a couple of stories that are,
The thing about...
bad, but that's, like, a justified thing.
The thing about it is that, like, because I was talking about whole bodies of work as kind of a segue so you can talk about Lovecraft.
That's, oh, fuck.
Because that was something, but, if you look at all of Stephen King's work, it's about 50-50 with, like, stuff. If you look at, because there's, like, one or two really oddball stories that stick out violently
Right.
in each collection. Like, I'm trying to think, Just After Sunset, for the most part, like, really good contemporary horror, really poignant political stuff, for the most part. There was definitely a story in there, though, about a guy who envisions his metabolism as workmen, and then starts to have dreams about how he's putting them off of work, because he's getting healthier. That was weird, and it's in one of my all-time favorite horror collections.
Right.
Most of the stories in there were gold, but, like, that one
was weird.
Super weird. It's called Stationary Bike, if anyone wants to read it.
Of course.
My recommendation. And then there's, like, Nightmares and Dreamscapes it had some really good stories in there, but the ratio was a little bit, like, the odd ones they were the weirdest ones, but they didn't stand out as much because there were more than just a couple of them. And this is the one, I think, because I was talking to Alan about it in the car, there's one about a finger, like a 12-foot finger that comes out of the drain, and this guy has to, like, battle this drain finger with, like, Drano and a chainsaw, and it's not what you expect from a master of horror.
Right. It's like, what's going on?
But, yeah, I think usually Stephen King has a couple really weird ones in every collection that he does. Or one, because sometimes he'll do that, like, 4 novella in a collection thing. But, for the most part, like, if you look at an author who does a lot of short stories, there's just, like, 1 or 2 that really stand out.
Right, because it's like, and sometimes it's like an experimental thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, of course you're going to experiment once or twice. But it's interesting when the experiment makes it to the final thing.
Yeah.
Or if it's not an experiment, it's like, this is different than usual. I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So do you want to talk about Lovecraft?
The awkward Lovecraft situation. So, Lovecraft is also a master of horror. Everyone knows H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, Lovecraft is, like, one of the first masters of horror.
Right, and, like, so everyone knows Cthulhu and, like, the Mountain Men. Like, everyone knows his stuff.
Yeah.
It's been very influential, especially in, like, monster creation and, like, all sorts of things. Dude was also super racist.
Yeah.
Like, super uncomfortably racist.
Yeah.
Harley's upset about it.
Oh, that's fair.
That's more than fair about it. But yeah, he was just, like, really, like, there's just certain stories where he just, like, a lot of the time I think he just avoids talking about anyone who's not white.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, which is fair because when he does, like...
I kind of wish he had done that all the time, maybe.
So maybe we could have been like, oh shit!
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will still debate that he wasn't, and it's like, no, you're wrong. The infamous one is, like, he comes across, like, a corpse of a black man, which he describes badly,
Yeah.
Very badly.
Right.
And it's like, maybe don't, actually. Maybe you should have just avoided this entirely. I was also reading up on it, and it was like, he also enjoyed reading Mein Kampf. So, that's fucked. So, like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, so sometimes, when an author puts their personal views into a story, it's bad.
Yeah.
Like, really bad.
The one good thing about that is this is one of those things I tend to get a little bit hypocritical on, because I really don't like seeing stuff like that.
Right.
Especially, like, it's one thing because Lovecraft was alive during a very racist time in history.
Right.
So, like, it doesn't justify it, but it's a little bit easier to put into context.
Right.
Like, than if we saw something like that in, like, a really famous story that had been written today.
Right, it would have been... because, like, they didn't have access to as much information as we do, which, again, doesn't justify it, but...
But putting it into context, it does kind of... It makes it less infuriating, I guess.
Right.
Even though it's still pretty far from the ideal. So it's one of those things, but I'm always, like... I don't like defending stuff like that, and I don't think I ever have in any kind of contemporary literature.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always really quick to defend political horror writers from the left side, and I feel really bad about it, because I know it's like one of those, I should defend freedom of speech a little bit more, because it's like, political horror is a genre that I don't think I've ever read any political horror from the right, honestly.
That's because we're living in it.
That's just my life. I don't want to read more of that.
Right.
But, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, for political horror things, I believe very strongly, and even maybe not for political horror things, for any kind of speculative fiction, Handmaid's Tale being a great example, I think putting political ideals into your work is a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really infuriating, though, to read it from the other side.
Right.
And it's something... the one that really gets me, I've been on hiatus for, like, over a month now on the horror blog, but right before I left, there was, like, a lot of drama going on. I was in a position where I was, like, constantly defending Max.
Right.
For stuff, because he writes some very politically fueled horror pieces.
Right.
And it's like, I definitely wouldn't defend, writing that strongly if the ideals didn't line up with my own views.
Right.
And I feel bad.
I think it was one of those things where it was like a lot of people were like, I'm trying to remember what the exact situation with him was. Because it was, people were accusing him of forcing his ideas down their throat.
Right.
When, like, he was just putting them on his blog.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's one of those things where I think, again, I wouldn't, because here's the thing, I don't think Max ever, I agree with Max on a lot of the issues.
Right.
Because I feel like it's one of those things where, in his stories, I mean, this comes down to politics in general, is, like, because he, doesn't believe in controlling other people.
Yeah.
Because, like, a lot of his stuff is, like, about, like, abortion and, like, anti-vaxxers and, like,
right.
Things that are inherently dangerous. Because, like, those are the things is, like, you can't support that and then, like, be, like, morally right, because you're willfully endangering your children and, like, other people.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the thing.
And I guess where it comes down to, for me, one of the reasons why I am having such a tough time talking about this is because it's a situation that I've been lucky enough to, for the most part, avoid. Like, I've never had to defend political horror pieces that don't line up with my views.
Right.
From a creative standpoint, if you have political views and you want to write about them, I encourage you to do that. As an individual, I would never defend work specifically that didn't line up with my own ideals in that way.
Right.
Because I am still an individual, although I, like, while supporting creators, I guess, is where I come down to that.
Right. I think it's one of the things with Lovecraft it's like, because using that sort of language, because he did use the N-word
right.
Several times, that's like knowingly oppressive in your writing, which I think is a bad thing. Like, I know it's like a whole freedom of speech thing, but I just can't like be like good with it. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Maybe don't say that, because it's not using it to like explore the issue. It's like actively using a slur, you know.
Yeah.
That's sort of where I come down to on it. Harley, what do you think? He looked at me. He's looking at me.
That's another thing that we've gotten so off topic.
We have gotten very off topic. As it turns out,
I was just reading a thing that Stephen King had talked about this the other day.
Oh yeah.
Where I was reading it the other day. He didn't talk about it the other day. Just to clarify, because it was like 10 years ago.
That's
like,
a little bit of time.
Right. But he was talking about how, because someone had told, I don't even remember what it was, someone had told him he shouldn't write about something because he wasn't part of the, like, oppressed community.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole thing was like, but as a writer, like, this is how I can help show my support.
Right.
And it was interesting. It was an interesting thing.
I think it's a whole multifaceted sort of thing, as it turns out.
Yes.
There are many sides.
But the point is, Lovecraft stuck out in a bad way.
Right. It was among all his a brilliant imaginative horror, his dislike of, I guess, hatred of other people still wormed its way in, which was not good. Nobody likes to just suddenly be... I think that was one of the things. I was also reading, it was the reason I stopped reading Arabian Nights.
Oh.
Is because in the beginning, it's like super racist. And it was like...
It's also very sexist.
Right.
Consistently.
It's one of those things where, again, I understand the time period it was written in, so I understand the writer having those opinions, but also I can't read it.
Yeah. Yeah, Arabian Nights was difficult.
Right. Because
times
like,
for that.
Buddy...
It was better once the stories started.
Right.
But, like, up until then, like, all the exposition was so sexist.
Right, and it's like, what the fuck is happening?
Just as a final note in tying this to our topic,
Uh-huh.
all of Max's stories kind of read like experiments where they should be the outlier, but that's all of his work.
His whole thing is sort of, making horror out of unique stuff.
Yeah.
It's the dick spiders. It's the dick spiders.
You can even tell because, like, the titles of so many of them just sound like things like I shouldn't be reading this.
Right.
Like butt stuff.
Yeah.
Or
God.
my erection lasted longer than 4 hours. Oh boy.
Because it's also one of those things, his names are also unique, because sometimes they're like several sentences.
Yeah.
Is the title, and sometimes it's just like butt stuff. And it's like...
Yeah, because the other one you talked, the abortion one, it was like the title of that was so long.
Right.
It was like when my best friend couldn't get an abortion, we were forced to make a tough choice, or like whatever the name of the thing was, and it's like, whoa.
Whereas compared to the other one...
compared to butt stuff.
Or compared to assisted suicide, which was another one of those.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like... Oh, God. But it's interesting, because you also see him changing the names.
Yeah.
Because when he reblogs something, you'll click on it, and then it'll have a different title, like, on the site.
It's also something that I think is really interesting, just as, like, a formatting platform thing, because for a long time, that was, the way that most of his stories are named, that was, like, the popular naming convention for stories on No Sleep,
right.
Which is when he was posting his IIA. And now, we have, like, shorter titles.
Because
comparatively.
he's not posting there as much.
Right, because it's more of, like, a personal blog thing.
Right. Because I think the thing with, like, No Sleep is it's, like, supposed to be, like, a forum post.
Right.
And usually forum posts are sentences or
That's
questions.
how we got, like, a lot of those long titles, I think.
Right.
Originates from the No Sleep days.
Back in my day on Reddit, No Sleep.
I never had a day on Reddit No Sleep.
No, they kept kicking you off.
I had literally one day on Reddit No Sleep.
And then they wouldn't post any more of your stuff.
That's, yeah.
Oops.
If only I'd been famous.
But yeah. So I think this brings us to sort of the advice section, if we have any.
I do. Especially, I have mostly horror advice, which I feel bad about, because I try to give, like, well-rounded, non-specific advice.
But,
which I guess you can apply to other genres. I only have horror examples today. If you're going to have some kind of thing that, like, seems really random, if you can justify it, there's a good chance that your audience will also be able to justify it, and it will come across better.
Right.
And like we were talking about in American Horror Story, there's that one really random scene where Judy sings the name game, and you're kind of like, what? But when you think about it, like, the more effort you as the viewer put into the scene, the sadder it gets.
Right.
To the point where you're kind of like, this is horribly depressing. Like, I watched the season with my family for the first time in a really long time, and it kind of bummed me out, honestly, even though it was, like, a fun, happy scene.
Right.
Because it just, like, what it represents was so much darker when you put it into that context.
Right.
Another really good example from American Horror Story Asylum, because they also have, in the Asylum, they play the same song on repeat over and over again, and it's Dominique by the Singing Nun, and it's one of those things where it's, like, out of context, it seems really weird, because they're in, oh god, where, I just watched it, I should know where it takes place. I think they're in LA, but they're, like, they're in the US, and they're at this, they're in this institution, and everything's just really dark, and they're playing, like, this really upbeat French song, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you look into the history of the song, it was written by a woman who was persecuted by the church for being lesbian, which is, like, the main theme of Asylum. So,
no,
that was, like, that's what happens to the main character. She's being persecuted by the church. For being a lesbian.
Oh, no!
And it's like, so it was like, it's one of those you kind of have to, it's one of those shows where, like, they have a lot of historical tie-ins that you have to dig into, but if you have, like, parallels like that you work into your own stories, you know?
Right.
It'll be really random at first, but it'll be, like, a really cool thing to people who are willing to do the extra work to look into that.
Right.
Or to people who randomly know a lot of facts about French music. Because that was just one of those things I knew going in. And it,
because you just know things sometimes.
I never questioned why they were playing that song, and until someone asked me, they're like, why is this song playing? And it's like, you know what, out of context.
Oh, I suddenly understand.
So, yeah, that's just one of those, like, and it kind of goes, we talked about this a little bit during villain motivation, like, if you understand why it happens, you don't really have to spell it out for your audience.
Right.
But you should understand it yourself.
Right. It's like, having, like, it's like the pink elephants from Dumbo. So the pink elephants happen because Dumbo is drunk. That happened. But so that's the reason that happens. Is because, you know, this thing led to this thing. And then, so, it makes sense. So it should always sort of be like that, where there's a reason it happens. It shouldn't just happen. It can appear to just happen. But there should be, if someone asks you why, you should be able to give an explanation.
Right. That, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give that explanation, but you should be able to.
Right.
Because it allows for continuity for those people who enjoy your work well enough to try and string those things together.
Right. I think it's also one of those things is you should make sure that it's appropriate for your audience. Like, you shouldn't...
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about?
What?
Speaking of appropriate for your audience, the tunnel scene from Willy Wonka. From
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What a fucking...
Gene Wilder having, like, a nightmarish boat ride.
Yeah, I still don't understand the boat ride scene.
My favorite thing is that they were gonna cut it and Gene Wilder wouldn't do the movie. He's like, we have to leave it in there. And then they didn't tell any of the other actors that they were going to be filming it. So they're all, like, genuinely terrified.
That's amazing. I love that.
So good.
But yeah, it was like...
But it scared a lot of kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was the downside.
Well, it was also, like, I feel like, because the author... he was still alive when that version came out, right?
I think so.
He did not like it, as I recall.
He also had a lot of very conservative, not the best ideas about stuff.
Well,
as
in that
turns
case,
out, probably not related to the traumatizing scene in a family movie, but whatever.
Right. But yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, if it's not related to anything, is it cool enough to leave in? Because sometimes you're allowed to just have cool shit.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I mean, it's fun to see.
Right.
If there's something you really want to put in there, there's a good chance people are just going to want to see it.
Right. Like, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, if it's enjoyable to watch, a lot of people don't care.
Right. So, you'll definitely be taking a chance if you do stuff like that, but we're not gonna tell you not ever to take chances.
Right. Sometimes you do, and sometimes it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I had one other thing I was gonna say. Yes. About being able to explain things.
Yes.
I want to talk real fast about Pulse 2.
Oh, yes.
Because in Pulse 2, there's a character who shows up and hijacks the car that the main characters are going in, and he has, like, a thumb drive, and he shows up and he's like, I have a plan that will either save the world or end it a whole lot sooner, and he leaves the party to go embark on this, like, magical, wonderful save the world quest, and we never hear from him again.
Jesus Christ.
Which I think is really, if the movie had been better, I think it might have been a really interesting point in that, like, when you choose not to follow people you lose out on that resolution, which is kind of a concept that I took away from the movie, even though I don't think that the movie was written intelligently enough that that was the intention.
Right.
I think that was just, like, a random thing that happened.
It was just like a
were
thing.
juggling too many subplots in that movie. There's no way that's what I was supposed to get out of it. That's the other thing about, I guess, kind of having nonsense stuff in there, though, is that, again, your audience is probably fairly smart. Like, they're gonna take away things from it that you didn't necessarily intend.
Right. And sometimes it works out for the best.
Yeah.
But, other times... No, it didn't. Sometimes it's just bad.
We should start a religion around Pulse 2.
What?
Yeah.
We have to end the episode. That was out of place.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any other advice on making things out of place?
I don't think so. I think it's mostly making sure you have an understanding of why it's happening. If you don't have an understanding, make sure it's good enough, like, just quality-wise, that it's, like, it'll be enjoyable.
Another thing to throw in here also is that having scenes that look out of place in comparison to the rest of the project can be a really good way to illustrate something.
Right.
Like being drunk, or, like having a nightmare, or...
Right, it can help you to show, like, maybe a side of a character or a side of a situation that hasn't been addressed and wouldn't come up otherwise. Because as it turns out, sometimes it's hard to justify those sort of things. So sometimes you just gotta make it sort of weird. Dream sequences are very good for making things weird.
Yeah. They get kind of tropey sometimes, so, like, be careful.
Right.
Be aware of what you're doing.
Definitely be aware. I think that's one of the things about dream sequences is people aren't aware when they're writing it.
Yeah.
That it gets tropey, but it does.
Yeah. I can only think of horror examples today. I'm sure there are other things where that happens. But yeah, it just be, like, and this all comes back down to know your market, I guess.
Right.
Like,
know your audience.
Know what your audience is going to like. Know what the ups and downs are of people who have done this before you. And yeah.
Experiment.
Read a lot of books. That wasn't a good thing, because we didn't talk about a lot of books.
We didn't talk about a lot of books.
Read 20th Century Ghost and watch a lot of Netflix shows, I guess.
There you go. That works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's about it. Harley, your final thoughts? He's got a couple of breaths he would like to get in on the podcast.
That's fair.
Well, I think that's it.
Yeah.
This has been Unsolicited Advice. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
This is Harley, and we will see you guys next time. I closed it, but it's still recording.
Good.
Bye!
Bye!